This is the old Air Force One, which has flown 6 US presidents, and it entered service when the Soviet Union was still around. And this is the new Air Force One, which is bigger and better in almost every way, except for one tiny difference: surviving a missile attack. Military aircraft typically avoid a hit mid-air by confusing the incoming missile, for example, by firing flares which generate intense heat, giving heat-seeking missiles a much more attractive target than the aircraft itself, or by shooting chaff, which releases thousands of tiny metallic strips into the air to create false radar returns that confuse radar-guided missiles. But these countermeasures are not limited to the military. In 2003, an Airbus DHL Express cargo plane took a hit from a shoulder-fired missile, also known as man-pads, shortly after taking off from Baghdad. So for 12 months, 10 FedEx cargo planes were equipped with a laser-based anti-missile system as a proof of concept. That system could identify and track incoming missiles, then shoot a powerful infrared laser that dazzled the threat. But if FedEx cargo planes could shoot down missile threats in the 2000s, how come the new Air Force One that transports the United States president can't do the same in 2026? Well, because this isn't really the new Air Force One, at least not the one that the US Air Force originally ordered. The actual next-generation fleet of Air Force One is made up of 2 heavily modified Boeing 747-8 aircraft, known as VC-25B. In July 2018, Boeing was awarded a $3.9 billion contract to deliver the first jet in 2024. By 2026, Boeing had lost $2.8 billion on that deal, and delays had pushed the delivery to 2028, toward the end of President Trump's second term. So, understandably, he wasn't very happy about it.
No, I'm not happy with Boeing. It takes them a long time to do, Air Force One. We gave that contract out a long time ago.
But he also wasn't going to wait that long.
I could buy one from another country, perhaps, or get one from another country.
Just 3 months later, Qatar offered the US government a gift, a $400 million luxury Boeing 747-8 that was originally built for the Qatari royal family. What a coincidence, huh? Also, what a coincidence that 5 days before he said this,
or get one from another country. So,
President Trump had left his Mar-a-Lago residence in his motorcade, headed to Palm Beach International Airport, and had toured that very same Qatari airplane that was later gifted to him.
If a foreign government offers you anything, but especially something close to $500 million worth, the answer is no thank you. End of story. Very simple.
The ethics around accepting a $400 million jet from a foreign government is not the only complication here. Turning a luxury Boeing 747 into a presidential command aircraft isn't as simple as repainting the outside and looking in the seat cushions for hidden microphones. Oh, I thought it felt a little funny. These modifications cost billions. This is why Boeing is now kicking itself in the wheels for having signed a fixed-price contract back in 2018, because it meant they would be the ones to absorb any cost overruns. And if you know anything about military projects, cost overruns are less of a surprise and more of a tradition. The old Air Force One and the new ones being retrofitted by Boeing are designed to operate during some of the worst scenarios imaginable: a national emergency, a nuclear war, and ultimately the Canadian invasion of Florida in February. This demands secure communications, hardened electronics against EMP attacks, and various defensive systems, including anti-missile countermeasures. But who would make these modifications to the Qatari jet? Boeing was already behind schedule. In fact, the company was investigated in 2023 because the Yankee White credentials for about 250 Boeing employees who worked on the Air Force One planes had lapsed. The Yankee White clearance is an additional requirement for those working on matters connected to the president, including his aircraft. That said, by March 2025, the Yankee White clearance was no longer a requirement for Boeing employees to speed up the project. So aerospace and defense contractor L3Harris took on the Qatari jet and finished a job that normally takes years to do in a record 10 months. But to make that schedule work, some of the highly complex modifications planned for the permanent Air Force One were intentionally left out. This is why the Qatari plane is called VC-25B Bridge. Now, according to the Air Force, the modifications were done without compromising the president's security. However, that statement was soon challenged by reality. The VC-25B bridge was officially unveiled at Joint Base Andrews on June 19, 2026. During that ceremony, President Trump announced that he won't be flying on the old VC-25A anymore.
My return from the G7 summit was the last planned trip aboard the VC-25A.
Less than 3 weeks later, the new bridge aircraft flew its first international trip to a NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey. But while President Trump was sitting in a country bordering Iran, the United States launched major strikes against Iran. The next day, instead of flying back on the same Qatari airplane, the president left Turkey on the old Air Force One, saying he wanted to fly the old airplane for old times' sake.
But why aren't you flying the new plane home?
It's going to go to a couple of bases stop so the soldiers can see it because it's truly magnificent.
It was only after landing in the UK in the old Air Force One that the president switched to the Qatari aircraft. But the New York Times reported that the real reason was because the Secret Service had urged him to switch airplanes. The Times later reported that the VC-25B bridge, quote, lacked the defensive countermeasures that the old model had, unquote, including advanced anti-missile capabilities. This came from multiple officials who had been briefed on how the jet was retrofitted. Less than 2 weeks later, President Trump announced that the brand new Air Force One was going back into the shop, not because it had insufficient capabilities.
It has a lot of capability, but as I understand it, in about a month or so, they're going to send it to have it be maxed out.
What is unclear is how much it would cost to retrofit this free gift. The estimates are anywhere from $400 million to $1 billion, but this funding was not appropriated directly by Congress through standard budgetary channels. According to the Secretary of the Air Force, Troy Mink, the money is instead coming from the LGM-35A Sentinel program, which is intended to replace all 450 Minuteman III nuclear missiles. What the White House means by plane maxing is classified, but 1 month is probably not enough time to add the lower-level exit. These are retractable, foldable stairs located in the belly of the permanent Air Force One aircraft. So, in case of an emergency, the president doesn't have to rely on a ground crew and the external stairs to board or unboard, especially when the stairs decide they don't want to move. The Air Force One has also traditionally been capable of aerial refueling, allowing the president to stay airborne far longer during a national emergency. On 9/11, President George W. Bush stayed airborne for hours on Air Force One, which demanded refueling mid-air. The plane only landed once the security deemed it safe to land. But the Qatari jet doesn't need to have aerial refueling capability, because the two new Air Force One aircraft that Boeing is delivering in 2028 also cannot be refueled mid-air. That capability was dropped from the VC-25B program altogether to reduce cost and complexity. This means that after spending hundreds of millions of dollars on plane maxing and waiting years on Boeing to deliver the next generation of presidential transport, the most capable Air Force One would still be the old airplane that took to the skies when the Berlin Wall was falling.